Ian Blackford joins me now. A very good morning to you, Ian Blackford. We'll come on to your calls for a general election in a moment. First of all, though, what do you make of Liz Truss's resignation? Happy to see her go?
Well, I'm relieved that she's gone. It's been a challenging few weeks, hasn't it? And of course, it's been one big financial experiment, and it's one that's gone horribly wrong. The impact it had in the financial markets, the fact the Bank of England had to step in, the decline in the pound, but perhaps above all else, the fact that mortgage rates have risen as sharply as they have. There's a price to be paid for all of this. She should never have been Prime Minister. This was a march to the right that we had with Tory party members over the summer in the leadership election. They're all looking to outdo each other, but my goodness, it's been unedifying. She singularly was unfit for office. And I think now we've got a Conservative party, a Conservative government that are really out of touch with the electorate. And that is why, in the situation that we're in this morning, the right response is for the people of all these islands right across the United Kingdom to have a say in a general election.
Well, you, like Labour, want that general election, but it's in the gift of the Prime Minister, so it's just not going to happen, is it?
Well, I think my message to Conservative MPs is to recognise where we all are, recognise that this is a government that's out of time, that played fast and loose with our financial well-being over the course of the last few weeks. And they need to accept that they've lost that moral authority to govern. They need to act not just in their narrow party interests, but act in all our national interests. And the response to that is to make sure that the people right across the islands have their say in a general election.
Well, if there was a general election now, and as I say, it looks very unlikely given that it's the Prime Minister that would have to call it, Labour looks set to win according to the latest polls. So would you rather see Labour in power than the Conservatives? Would you support a Labour government?
Well, I want people to have the right to have their say. Of course, I don't want to see Conservative governments. We've always supported progressive politics, but I would say to whoever's going to be in Downing Street from whatever party, that they have to respect democracy in Scotland and they have to respect the right of the Scottish Parliament to be able to enact the mandate that we have for an independence referendum. But here in Scotland, there's been a number of polls over the last few weeks. The only one that counts is when people go out to vote. But all the polls in Scotland actually show that the SNP would increase the number of MPs that we have in Scotland. The Tories would be wiped out if there were an election today. But we need to make sure that people in Scotland have the right to give their verdict on Westminster governments and be able to reflect on the offer that we have of taking Scotland back into the European Union, the pain that we've had of being out of the European Union, to be able to reverse that and to get the investment that we need in the Scottish economy, particularly in the green energy sector, as we seek to deliver on our promise to get to net zero by 2045. So we're contrasting two futures, staying with Westminster with the underachievement, the under-delivery that was seen, or a different future for us, a better future of Scotland taking its place back in the family of nations in the European Union.
What do you make of the suggestion this morning that Boris Johnson might run for the leadership?
Horrified. I mean, this was a man that was taken out of office quite simply because he disrespected the office of Prime Minister, one that millions of people were appalled by his behaviour over the COVID crisis, the partying that took place in 10 Downing Street. A Prime Minister, let's remember, the only Prime Minister in history that was found guilty of breaking the law while in office, and a Prime Minister that still got to come in front of the Privileges Committee over his behaviour while he was in office. I have to question what Tory MPs are thinking, that they believe it to be reasonable that Boris Johnson should be brought back again. He should never be allowed anywhere near public office.
Well, whoever wins, and we don't know if Boris Johnson will run, how important is it that the next Prime Minister reaches out to Nicola Sturgeon? She said that Liz Truss didn't call her in her 6 weeks in office. How much of a problem do you think that was?
Of course, it's a problem. You know, we have our political differences, and it's right that we, show people exactly what we're trying to do where these differences exist. But where it's right, it's also equally important that we work together. And let me give you the example of Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, because he has worked across party with all party leaders to make sure that we all stand together against Putin, against that illegal war in Ukraine, and to make sure that we support our friends in Ukraine, and to see not just Liz Truss, but Boris Johnson before that showed utter disrespect for the government in Cardiff and Edinburgh, it's simply not acceptable that the normal protocols in office need to exist. And it comes down to that lack of appreciation and understanding about how those in the highest office need to interact with colleagues that have responsibility in government as well.
Well, Ian Blackford, SNP leader at Westminster, thanks very much indeed for your time this morning.